The thoughts, views, expressions, and opinions of this podcast, as well as its hosts, are for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. We simply want to encourage, shed insight, empower, equip, and inspire those who listen. We are not trained professionals or claim to be. It does not constitute or take place of actual advice from your doctor or therapist. We hope you enjoy the show. Thank you. So my levels are good. Levels are good. And we're getting thumbs up by Izzy, and Izzy's in the camera tonight. So shout outs to Izzy. We're not live. We're gonna go live one day where we're gonna have a live and get some feedback. Maybe have some Q&A. That'd be pretty dope. But we're here tonight. For those who are listening, for those who are new listening to the sound of my voice and don't know who I am, my name is Javi. I'm here with Kingdom Talks podcast, and I'm here with a friend, a sister in Christ by the name of Caitlin, and we're just gonna chop it up and talk some stuff.
So excited.
Yeah, I'm excited because we've been actually trying to do this for like the longest.
A year almost.
Yeah, I think it's been close to it. How time flies, right?
I know.
It's crazy, but you know, life be lifing, and we get caught up in our busyness. But the cool thing about social media is that we still get to stay connected in a weird, tangible way.
Almost keep tabs.
Yeah, like, oh, look at Caitlin. She's starting her little merch line and she's doing her fitness thing. So, like, yeah, we definitely thank goodness for social media and stuff like that. But how was your weekend?
It was good.
Good?
Yeah.
Busy?
Yes, it was surrounded by awesome people.
Yeah.
Just networking at a business conference out west. And
cool.
Anyways, it was really cool. So,
nice.
Lots of faith-based leaders just in
That's
the
so cool.
entrepreneurial world, just trying to, set the captives free financially.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm such a believer in that because I believe that I don't really subscribe so much on the prosperity gospel, but I also don't subscribe on the opposite of that because there is an opposite anti-prosperity gospel.
The more good people with money, the more we can use our resources to combat.
Absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely, because I think that some people take Bible so literal where it speaks about suffering. And they feel like, oh, we're here on earth to suffer like Jesus did and to live have this poor man's mentality about their faith. And I don't think Jesus created us to be broke. I don't think God created us to not have resources, to not expand his kingdom. I think he was very well aware that there is going to be a country like the United States that's a very capitalistic country. That money is the driving force of what we do to do our day-to-day stuff, whether you are in ministry or whether you are in the entrepreneurial world or whatever arena that you're in. You're going to need resources, you're going to need money to do what we're passionate about,
Yeah, and I mean, this country was founded on the principles of free enterprise, which is a little bit different than capitalism,
right?
Where everybody has the ability to add value to the marketplace and enterprise. And so it used to be a society of people who had their own businesses. People supported each other's businesses, farmlands, and then the Industrial Revolution obviously took things in a different direction where we transitioned to being more worker bees and teaching people what they need to learn so they can, be engineered to work in a factory for 8 hours a day. Yeah. Right. So that's like a whole other rabbit hole. Oh my gosh, here we started. But just being around, just getting back to the spirit of entrepreneurship and understanding that this is actually the one country where you can create the freedom and the abundance. And it has to obviously be with the right heart. I mean, the whole point is, where's your heart at? If you're that rich young ruler that is not willing to leave the things, to gain Jesus, right? Then we do lose it all, we lose in the end versus losing our life so we can save it, right? I think that was a big one for me. I grew up in a house where I loved my parents and they did the best of what they knew,
right?
And I grew up with my grandmas. They really raised me full time pretty much. But it was always like this mentality of like cardboard box with family you love or alone in a mansion. And like there just came a point in my life, like after doing everything right, and like being even further backwards financially. If everything right according to society, like go to school, get good grades, study what you love, take out the student loans, get the second degree, and get a good job, and you'll be set. And it's like I did all that, and I was still wildly empty, which is, you know, I didn't have the Lord at that time either.
Right.
But then, like, you know, to start further back, you know, and it's like, well, is there another option? Like, it's like, oh, well, success is for the chosen few. Like, you just have to be lucky, or like, it's probably daddy's money. Or, it's like, what if these people actually worked hard, and like, what did they do to create the results that they created? And can I duplicate those results? And also, are you integrous people? Like, is the way the money has been made, is the way you live your life in alignment with how I would want to, right? And getting around that, because there's plenty of wealth down here, obviously. Right. And what is the point of having it if it comes at the sacrifice of your family, your values, your integrity, your faith? But then what if there's an option, you know, what if there are ways to create a greater life, and it doesn't require having, you know, building something that would allow us to, you know, have ownership, you know, so we can own our time, own our money, instead of being owned solely by an employee. Right. You know, and if that's someone's journey, if that's how they're happy with that journey. I know that for me, that wasn't the path. Like, I was like, there's got to be more to this life. Absolutely. Because it can become slave work. I hate to use the word slave, because slavery is used in so many different contexts, and I want to be. You're an indentured servant. Like, you are giving your life, your time. Time is your greatest currency for money, and it's so funny because it says you know, the Bible says you can't serve God and money at the same time. But if you're giving your time, your life, which is the currency that God gives us, for money in exchange, if that's all that's taught, then we are serving money. Yeah. So the whole point is like, you know, teaching people other ways to create an income that allows them to get free, so they don't have to be servants to money. Yeah, and I think there's a healthy space too, where you can be a good steward of your time, your resources, and a good steward of your money, and also a good steward of the people around you. Like how are you stewarding the people around you? Relationships. So who's championing you? Who's celebrating you? Who's pushing you closer to your goals? Who's even pushing you closer to the Lord? You know what I mean? Like I like to always be around those people who are empowering me, encouraging me. That's why I love Pedro so much. We talked off camera about like how I even got to this space. To be in a barbershop that doesn't belong to me, that had nothing to do with opening this establishment. He, you know, did his time. The blood, sweat, and tears that he, you know, had to endure to be in this space, and for him to just give me the keys and be like, I believe in you, I believe in the vision, and I want you to prosper. Those are the people that you want in your life. I can honestly say like that was a huge transition and shift in my life. When I was having those realizations, you know, and seeking for you know, just to create a greater life, and understanding like my life, starting to believe at that point, this is like at 25, that my life is not by random design. It is actually very purposeful and specific. And there's a reason why I feel that, you know, down to my core, and looking to understand like, you know, what's it going to look like to create a life of significance, not just success, because I always dreamed of doing these big things, but then like everyone was like, well, just like, you'll do that, but like go to school, get your grades, get a job, and then like you'll be set for life. It kind of kills your dream. You lose it, you lose your vision, and like before you know it, it's, you know, 12 years of just beating down with the same information, and just to have that, you know, to go to that next thing, and never ask the questions as to why. So coming out of that, you know, feeling like, okay, what direction am I going to go? You know, I know there's more to this life. Reading, you know, more like personal development books, you know, practicing gratitude, and then like around a couple months after that, like deciding like I'm meant for a great life, and I don't know what it's going to look like, and I'm willing to release fitness being the only way to create any kind of result in my life, because I studied that. I knew that it was my identity. It was what I put. Once I lost volleyball, like that's where I put my identity. And so like I knew that this isn't going to stand the test of time. So who am I outside of this, and who do I need to know that is living like a greater life, or an example, and will see something in me? Like months after having these a couple months after having these realizations, I actually just met an awesome woman, an entrepreneur, and her husband, you know, great Christian couple that never pushed their values on me, but always stood in them and lived them out. And I just never seen a marriage like that. I'd never seen like just them talking about living below their means and being debt free, and you know, all this good stewards, and like restoring father power in the house, and mentoring and discipling people. And I was just like, who are you?
Yeah.
And, because most of my friends at the time, because your identity is informed by your community.
Correct.
Most of the people I ran with, worked out really hard and partied hard.
Yeah.
And like lived
Play
the
hard,
weekends,
party hard.
never asked any questions about like what more is there. And I love those people, but I was like, I looked at the guy 3 years ahead of me and I was like, and I was like, that's gonna be, if I do everything right, like him, like I will have that life. Is that a life I want?
Yeah.
And like at the time, trying to figure that out, I meet a chick that essentially had some great results, just both not just financially, but also like in like character wise, life wise, values wise. I've never seen anyone live like that. Yeah. So that relationship, like she saw something in me, her and her husband, and took me under their wing.
And I think that's God's great design too. Like God,
eventually that relationship opened the door to me being open to the Lord. Yeah.
And God kind of wants us to be a well-rounded human being. Yeah. Like He wants us to have value. He wants us to uphold what says in the Bible. You know what I'm saying? Like He wants us to have the values, have the core values, have your mantras based on biblical statements that are read through those scriptures, through those verses. I mean, like I remember in a place where I was kind of like in a very dark area, not knowing what I was doing, not knowing my worth, not knowing my purpose, and I just started reading more Bible. And it's funny how like the more Bible you read, the more it reads you.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. so crazy.
It's insane how the Bible does that. And you got to open up, obviously you got to open up to the idea that what you're reading is the Word of God. Yeah. What you're reading is a divine intervention that you may be experiencing because of the season that you may be in. So it's a powerful thing that the Bible can do that to an individual who opens himself up to the possibility that there is a grand creator and He is Jesus, and what He says in the Bible to be true is the truth, right? So how we could apply that to our lives is obviously discipleship. Yeah. How are you going to be discipled? How are you going to be mentored? And you have to put in the little bit of work to get to that place where you are discipled, where you are mentored, and you start, finding different areas of like, wow, I didn't know that I lacked in this. Mm-hmm. And wow, God revealed this about me. Yeah. And wow, like I really am a good athlete, communicator. I do have an entrepreneurial type of a mindset. I just have to kind of like work on that craft to sharpen myself to be better each and every single day.
Yeah. Or like, 100%. Yeah. And then I think I definitely want to have a conversation around identity.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I think I just reflected a lot about that this weekend, and just how many people don't know their identity. Yeah. How many men like are truly don't know who they are to the core. Yeah. And there's a great book that I recommend for men, and ladies can read it too. I'm reading it for myself. It's called Wild at Heart by John Elridge.
I heard about that book. Yeah.
Oh, it's incredible. Yeah. And it really talks about just the three things that is designed in like the DNA of a man, right? And the identity of a man, and what God's, and how like that relates to what God says about that in the Bible, like that every man wants an adventure to live, a battle to fight, and a beauty to love. Yeah. And like how those themes like have been really distorted and ruined in our society, and like confused. And there's a counterpart book for the ladies that I'm going to start reading called Captivating by the same author but with his wife. And it's the same thing. Who does God say women are? And like, what is their identity and their calling? And I just remember like, before knowing the Lord, my identity was always in like just so many different things, and it all ends, it all like, or doesn't feel like, or it's just never enough, or there's always needs to be more. Whether it was my performance, whether in school and volleyball, like I attached my identity to that instead of just like attaching even my identity to just progressing. Like, no, it's like the results determine my value. Right. The results of a relationship, or, just like validation from men, or like my identity being in the student athlete. And then if that wasn't the case, well, now I'm in sports performance, so now my identity is in personal training, and that led to like disordered eating, and it led to extreme workouts, and just like there was never, and then even when I was in peak shape, it was never enough. And so just all these things that couldn't fill me, right? And then like anchoring, like everyone's like, well, why did you choose to go this direction? Like especially these days, right? And I was like, well, I just found myself on top of like actually having a radical experience. Like, why do I continue to follow Jesus and dive deeper instead of just being like, oh, I prayed the prayer, we're good to go? Is like that attaching myself to a truth that is objective, that does not change, that is infinite and stands the test of time, has created more peace and like confidence and assurance in my identity than like anything else. Like, and to know like there's a creator and he like loves me and he's known me because, and then knowing the characteristics and the attributes of God, like learning that he's omnipotent, he's omniscient, he's all-knowing, he's transcendent. So, and he knows us each personally, and like he really chose to design me and knit me together, like Psalm 139 says, in my mother's womb, and create me. And like when I read about who he says I am, man, there's so much like healing and confidence,
and it's liberating too. It's liberating.
Okay, like the world can reject me, like the dude can break up, like the business partner can leave, but, like my identity isn't attached to that, right? My identity is attached vertically, right? So I don't know if you've battled with identity.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm having deja vu right now. I don't know if that means I'm like prophetic or something.
Maybe. Hey, we might be doing something here. Okay, no, but I do relate to that because like I remember before I got saved, as a man, like we apply unnecessary pressures on ourselves because we hold
these wounds.
Like the traumas that I experienced, and I was exposed to a lot of things at a very young age that I had no business being exposed to. Like I got exposed to pornography at a very young age. I got exposed to a lot of different things adult-wise that I was not supposed to be exposed to, and stuff like that. And so that those scars and those traumas definitely did kind of geared me to accepting that, oh, this is normal. People have sex at whatever age, and in high school everybody's sleeping around, and in college that's a thing. So it just kind of progressive as you start getting older, as a young adolescent, even through my preteens, young adolescence, and even in my 20s when I was in college, like it was just like an accepted thing. It was part of culture. Especially here in the United States, it's like it's culture to have the college experience because, hey, we go out and party and we go and study and we sometimes pay other people to do our papers, and we're going to go party on Thursdays and go party over the weekends and do it all over again. And it becomes like a lifestyle, really. But then you just don't realize that what you're doing is you're just really numbing yourself and constantly just like perverting your spirit, perverting your mind. And at the time, I didn't know that I was a spirit being. You know what I'm saying? I was just flesh. I'm just having a good time.
Just in the dark. Children of the dark.
Yeah. So like what you said is very powerful because like, people ask me like, why did you choose Christianity? Why did you land on Christianity? Why didn't you land on like
there's so many other things.
There's so many other things like the new age belief, like, oh, the universe is and there's a lot of things out there in the YouTube world where you can dive into some crazy theories, and
it goes to show we're designed to worship. You know, like we're worshing something, and it's
right.
not God.
Like
there's not enough evidence.
There's like literally people that subscribe that God is a woman. You know?
And they said it in the church. Anyways.
There's Satanism, there's Buddhism, there's universalisticism, where everything's universe, everything's one binary thing. Like everybody has a God, and all gods are good gods, and all truths. It's all the same truth, and it's a pretty murky water to be treading in. I do, warn people to like, if you are subscribing to that right now, and that's where you're kind of, it's a good start, but hopefully, because I started there, like, oh, well, there is a higher power, like, but I never proclaimed that the higher power was Jesus. And I think that's a good start. It's just if this is going to be a sign, and if you're looking for a sign, I think that if you're listening out there and you are struggling with who you want to identify with, it's not the things of this world. It's definitely a higher power. My belief is that God grabbed me and shook me and led me to the promised land. And it just becomes a journey. It really does become a journey, and you have to embrace it as such, because there's a lot of people that get saved and then they walk away from their faith because they start deconstructing their beliefs because they hung around the wrong people. They weren't discipled. Their church failed them. People fail you. I think when you put so much stock on people and on a church, it's a recipe for you to get burned in the long run. So I just always tell people, hey, get connected to a good community, a solid community who believes in the core values of what Jesus stood for, and just remember that it isn't really so much about yourself. It's so much bigger than yourself. And always run to the Lord. Always run to Jesus. And if you don't proclaim Jesus to be your Lord of your life, like, at least give it a try. Like, what is it for you to lose? There's nothing for you to lose. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, 100%. And who is this person? Why is he used as a cuss word? Why is he always talked about? Why is he so controversial? I used to say the most absurd things about the faith, about Jesus, because I was raised Catholic. And it was just to check it off the list, and that's what good people do. They go to church and don't ask questions, and
they get a bad rap too. Unfortunately.
Yes, and rightfully so. But I just remember, and this is a really distinct thing that I explain to people, because they're like, "Oh, like, you're religious," and I'm like, "No, Jesus is my Lord, but I'm actually not religious." Because they haven't made that distinction, and like that was the same for me, but like. Growing up, I'll never forget, I was in CCD, which was like 3rd grade, getting ready to, like, the classes that you do to qualify for communion, because it's works-based, right? So obviously I didn't know this at the time. I'm like in 3rd grade, but I remember being in a classroom and seeing the 10 Commandments, and being like, well, did not do that, and I went down the list and I was like, I'm never gonna make it to heaven. Like, I understood my depravity, but like there was nothing more after that. It was like, believe this or like you burn. Right? And it was like, keep these things and keep these rules and do these sacraments, and like, I'll never forget when they called people up to do communion one time before I had even done it. But my parents didn't want to leave me alone in the pew. They brought me with them, and the priest, I guess, like, thought I was old enough because I'm like really tall. Tried to give me the bread, and I didn't want to be rude. I didn't know what to do, and I just tried to grab it like normal. And there's like a certain way that you do it, and he was like, it was like just super awkward, and like I remember feeling like shame and guilt that like, I'm not allowed to eat the bread and that I don't qualify. And, then my parents eventually were like, once I got old enough, they're like, you can decide if you want to go for yourself or not. And I was like, I'm never coming back.
Because I think when you get to the point where it's like religion, and religion really just kind of focuses and puts an emphasis on works. Like, you got to work your way to heaven. How many times are you going to say the prayer? How many times are you going to say your Hail Marys?
And if you mess up, you just start all over.
You got to start all over, and then you got to go to confessions and confess to your priest and all these things.
If anyone who's watching this that's Catholic, I'm not taking a shot at your faith.
Not at all.
I'm just personally expressing to you my experience and what I found, the experience of many. Right, unfortunately. And I have a ton of theories around that, and but definitely it does be divisive. But this time around, right? So like, fast forward, I meet this couple. They start to they change the course of my life, not obviously in a day, but just through that friendship, that relationship, seeing them walk. Like, really live it out. Just be so full of grace, so full of love, so helpful, just so serving. And just through their influence, like May of 2019, I was starting to open up to the belief that obviously at this point that something greater exists. Because by the time I met her, like, I was like, all right, like, I know I'm meant for more than just sucking air, paying bills, and dying. Like, show me something else. Like, I'm grateful I live in America, but also, how do I live here? And I'm also like, America broke. Like, this is crazy. Like, I'm a credit card debt. Like, what's going on? And then, then he delivers, essentially. He just hadn't revealed himself, as Jesus. And so, as far as like, the New Age is a great place to start, because I was like, I know something greater than me exists, and he, God will use anything, right? And so fast forward to May, Cinco de Mayo, actually, of 2019, there was an optional non-denominational service at a conference I was at,
Mm-hmm.
and they were gonna be there, and they didn't say like you should go, you should, like I almost didn't go, and my friend was like, hey, like we should just go. I was like, okay, whatever, like I'll learn something even if it's about the Bible. And it was actually John Maxwell, the leadership author, who was going to be preaching. That's the reason why I went, because he's a great leadership author, and I read his books and whatever.
Yeah, he's great books,
and his roots are obviously in the faith,
right.
And she's like, I'll go, like, even if it's about Jesus, I'm sure I'll learn something, or like the Bible.
And he was actually an active board member to some of the local churches in South Florida, too.
He's like based in Jupiter.
Yeah,
it's awesome. But nonetheless, I go.
I don't know if he still is, but I'm just saying that he was at one point.
Yeah. He's a great guy.
Yeah, great guy.
But whatever, I go to that service,
mm-hmm.
and they bring out a group to sing worship.
Yeah.
And like not even 2 minutes in, like the Holy Spirit takes over. I now know that.
Yeah.
And I start bawling like a baby.
Right.
And I'm like having this crazy out of body experience where I'm like, and this is just me. Everybody's story is different, and like, mm-hmm. so please, if you're listening, also don't compare. You know, some people it's like a steady aha that like comes into an aha moment, or multiple times coming to receive, and then having like an epiphany. Yeah,
that was my story.
Yeah, or being around, and all of a sudden like
mm-hmm.
it clicks, right, and you see your relationship with God. Different. For me, it was like a crazy, like my life is dramatic. I'm a dramatic, just flamboyant, boisterous person. So like, I see that theme through most of like my experiences with how God moves in my life.
Right.
He's so dramatic sometimes. I have this experience with the Holy Spirit. I'm crying, and I just remember like feeling chills all over my body, and I was like, I've never felt this good sober. Like I'm like, am I rolling? Like, cause that was my past, I was like, this is crazy. Like, it was like,
you're tripping out,
but at the same time, I'm like bawling, I can't stop. And then there's it was What a Beautiful Name was playing as well. And it's like, I'm like crying. I couldn't even stand at one point. I was so overwhelmed by God's glory that I just remember feeling shame and guilt at one point for being in that room and living how I lived up until that point. And we obviously won't dive fully in, but there's just some really bad decisions. Really, all the things I used to mock Jesus. I used to cuss with Jesus' name in it, like not just use Jesus as a cuss word, but like add some to it. Like, there's so much that I would just. It's so crazy to walk and then like just how I lived, and then having that guilt and shame, being like, how can I feel this good after living the way I live? Because the picture of God in my house was, if you don't live right, He'll never love you. You cut to me in that arena at 25 years old, having this experience, being like, how? Like, because I'm so far from having lived right. And I promise you, it was like clear as day. In my right ear, I heard, I'm just happy you're here.
That was crazy. And
it was like a prodigal son, prodigal daughter moment where like I knew in that moment it didn't matter what I'd done, where I'd been, how I lived, the choices I had made. Like, He'd loved me the whole time, and every single thing that had ever happened to me, good, bad, ugly, led me back to Him. Like, He used it all to reconcile me back to Him.
Wow.
And although we have free will and that was a choice, like He also is sovereign and ordained it all. Right? And it had been like 13 years, 15 years since I'd stepped into any kind of establishment like that. I'd never been to a non-denominational or anything either.
Or a conference, no less, right?
Yeah. Like,
was that your first conference?
Yeah, actually.
Your first conference? Wow. That's crazy.
It was so nuts. And I remember texting him and being like, my mentors, and being like, this is the first time I've ever sat in a service like this, and I am absolutely mind blown. Like, I owe it all to you guys.
Wow.
And the Lord 100% used them, and they never take the credit.
Yeah, for sure.
I knew in that moment, and when they did the altar call, I was at my feet, moved, and it took me like a month to really process what I had experienced.
Like, what am I doing?
Does that mean I have to start attending Catholic church now? And I'm like, so I consulted them about that journey, and then it slowly grew to being more the Word of Faith church. So then now being more at a stronger, like really focused church that's very equipping. And
I believe like any gospel.
Actually, and who introduced me to this church was Adelise.
Okay, Reveal.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so because that's funny you said Reveal, because I'm currently diving into the counseling side of it, because they do have a Christian counseling.
I use them.
I'm currently doing that, and I felt like I need, like on this show since the very beginning of this podcast, like episode 1, I always wanted to be like a strong advocate to mental health.
Yes, absolutely.
And I at one point, like a year into the podcast, I at the time, my therapist at the time, Alex, I asked him, hey, do you want to just hop on the pod? And because he knew obviously that I was, that I took this endeavor of being a content creator, a podcaster / YouTuber kind of thing. And he was like, well, that actually, I actually do encourage that, because that actually is therapeutic for you, Javier. And you do that. And I was like, thank you. And then I was like, would you mind if you... And he's like, sure, just let me know and I'll check my calendar and I'll try my best to get, make myself available. Long story short, he jumped on the podcast and we spoke on mental health and how, it's needed, how it shouldn't be treated as a luxury item, that it's actually a necessity.
Yeah, absolutely.
It shouldn't be a luxury item, although it's priced like a luxury item here in America. Unfortunately, if you don't have some type of insurance, it is very, very expensive. But there is some special organizations and resources like churches, like Reveal, that has donation-based counseling and stuff like that. So there is a way. I always trapped myself like, oh, I can't afford it. I don't have insurance. That's not for men. That's for wussies. I'm all right. I'll be all right. I don't need it. But I needed it. But yeah, it's just so cool to hear that you are in the place that you are, and essentially that's why you chose, for those that are listening, you chose Christianity.
Ultimate forgiveness, and then once I started diving in, I'd read that book and it reads you. I'm like, this is so crazy. Everything makes sense.
And people ask too, ask why choose Christianity, and which brings us
in relationship, not religion. That's another thing I was going to say. So now it's like, it's not about rules. It's not about keeping all these rules and staying clean, and then God will really love me. Right. It's coming to Him broken over and over and over again, and Him restoring me time and time again, and understanding that grace is unending, and sometimes it's so unfathomable that we don't even know how to accept it. But just understanding that we come to God broken, and then He restores us and loves us regardless of how we lived. And it's that love that makes me want to live a life that's in alignment with Him. It's that love and that grace that makes me want to go and serve people, that changes my heart, that takes away the desires of wanting to party, have, get with, whoever and date whoever out of validation, and make impulsive decisions and live for the now, and understanding and I wouldn't have that desire and knowledge if His love wasn't, we love because He first loved us, right? But what were you going to say? You were going to share something. I
was, because this is like such this is so God right now, because off camera, we were talking, me and Kaylin, Izzy too was here, we were talking about this Tim Keller video, and he does,
and it's what you're saying,
it literally it just
now's the time to share,
it literally segues to what I wanted to share with you guys. So as a content creator / podcaster, I like to have the pulse of where social media is going and what is talked about, what's trending, because I use that as content to use for my podcast, so I can give my perspective on the things that are talked about. Obviously, some things are secular, some things are Christian. This particular video is Christian based, but in the context of Tim Keller having this Google conference for these Google employees, who most of them, I want to say 80% of Google employees are either atheists or non-believers. Now, there's a difference. There's a difference between a non-believer and an atheist. We're not going to get into that. That's another conversation for a different time. But non-believers are typically not atheists. Non-believers are more likely believing in something other than God. So they might believe that the universe gives what they put out. They believe in a very karmic...
But is that agnostic? When someone's like, something greater exists, but I don't know what it is.
So it's very karmic thing. It's more like what you put out in the world is what you're gonna get. If you do people wrong, karma's gonna get you. And the Bible really doesn't, even in Hebrew or in the Greek, karma. The word karma doesn't exist in the biblical language. When you talk to these theologians and these Bible scholars about karma, they would venture to say, well, it's not really karma. It's more of what the Bible talks when it talks about reaping what you sow.
Yeah.
So what it is that you're sowing in. If you're sowing into the party life and you're sowing into that, you're going to reap the fruit of that. Because fruit doesn't necessarily have to be good fruit. You can bear rotted fruit. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? You could also bear fruit that looks good in the outside, but when you take a bite out of it, it's nasty. It's putrid. It's bitter. So we can bear that type of fruit too, depending on where we're sowing into and what it is that we're reaping.
Same as in Proverbs when it says, in the power of the tongue, in the tongue lies the power of life and death.
Yes.
Oh my gosh! Wow. Where's the part? It's like similar to reaping what you sow, but specifically with your words.
Correct. Yeah. So in this conference, Tim Keller. For those who don't know Tim Keller, he's a very well-known figure in the Christian faith. He's traveled the world. He was an evangelist. And I say was in the past tense because he recently passed away, so R.I.P. to him. He passed away in May of this year. But he's a Bible scholar / theologian / evangelist / minister / he did it all. He lived a really full, rounded life, and he, preached the gospel to the masses. And what he was really doing in the latter years of his life was speaking into the non-believers. Like he really made it his intention to be committed to speaking the gospel, speaking Bible, speaking Jesus specifically to the non-believer who was entertaining the idea of a higher power. So he utilized these Google Talks to speak into that and allow people to do a Q&A with him and ask him anything relating religion, relating God, relating other religions. And the questions were very, very, very articulated because, again, these are Google employees who are nerds, no offense. But they're very articulate of what they believe in. They're very passionate in what they do, what they stand for, the core values and stuff like that. So when they hear Tim Keller talk about the gospel and who Jesus is and what he was and what he stood for and what he stands for today in 2023, for example, it was something that opened up like a opportunity to allow people to ask these questions for Tim Keller to speak life into. So I just want to share this. It's going to be like probably a 10 to 12 minute clip on a question that was asked by a young lady in Google about religion. Why Christianity and not Judaism, Buddhism, or any other religion? And this is what Tim Keller said. I'm going to try to pull it up and avoid that. Ads. I hate ads. So I think it's in minute. I time-stamped it, so it's in minute 30. Okay.
This has been really, really interesting and a great opportunity. And I wanted to ask, I know you talked a lot about kind of the arguments for religion and the arguments against secularism, but I wanted to ask you about spirituality. In that,
notice how she says spirituality.
I and some of my peers, very much do believe that there is a higher power, and we don't believe in secularism. Like there is something that connects us all, that created us on this earth, but that doesn't necessarily translate into religion. And there's a lot of the dogma and Christianity and other religions don't necessarily appeal or make us uncomfortable, especially the way it can be used sometimes for hate today. And also necessarily kind of figuring out the differences between them. Like, why would one choose Christianity over Judaism, over Hinduism, when they all have kind of these different beautiful ways of bringing people together? So, but you're obviously a pastor and of the Christian faith, so you made a choice.
Well, yeah.
So just if you have any thoughts on that.
You only have, generally speaking, it's hard to have more than one career. It's hard to be both a Muslim and a Buddhist and a Christian cleric, 5 years or each. It doesn't work. I'll tell you what, I would suggest two things. I'm going to read you something out of the book, believe it or not. Thank you. Actually, you asked a question that gets me to the book. Oh, were you finished with the question?
Yeah, that was
okay. I would suggest on the multiple faiths, there's a book by John Dixon. He's Australian, who wrote a book called The Spectator's Guide to World Religions. The Spectator's Guide to World Religions. Now, he's like me, he's a Christian minister. But I read the book recently, and he said, I'm trying to create 5 small vignettes. He did Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, and Judaism. And he lays it out very, very as objectively as he possibly can, does everything he possibly can. He says, I'm sure critics will say it's obvious to see, even the way you handled Buddhism, that you're a Christian, but he says, I tried real hard, and besides that, everybody who would write a book like that will have to come from some position generally. And it's a really, really helpful book, because what it does is it just lays out the differences and tries very hard to say, now you make the decision, rather than him doing it. That's one side. Here's the other side, though. The last part of this book is actually the story of a guy named Langdon Gilkey. Langdon Gilkey was a young man who graduated from Harvard with a philosophy degree with honors in the 1930s, and went to China to teach at a university there. And when the Japanese overran that part of China, he was put into a detention camp. It was a really, really, really difficult place. 2,000 people in less than a city block. Everybody had, something like, there was 20 toilets for 2,000 people. It was a very, very difficult situation. And when he went there, growing up, he had lost his church faith. He had actually believed in the goodness of human beings and rationality as the way to overcome our problems, and that religion actually wouldn't help much. When he was there, he began to see, he basically came to see that there is absolutely no way. Human beings are basically selfish. He actually says at one point, I marked this in case somebody asked this question. He says, he said he came to believe what the Bible said about sin. He said self-interest seemed almost omnipotent next to the weak claims of logic and fair play. Mm-hmm. As the months went by, he constantly faced intractable self-centeredness. And he actually said, the fundamental bent of the whole human self in all of us was inward toward our own welfare, and we're so immersed in it that we hardly are ever able to see this in ourselves, much less extricate ourselves from our dilemma. He says everybody he saw who were really being cruel, they always gave rational and moral reasons for what they were already determined to do. He says even the most moral and religious people, because there were a lot of priests and missionaries there, who had been working in China, who were thrown in with everybody else. He says the most religious people found it incredibly difficult, not to say impossible, to will the good and to be objective and to be generous and fair. And what they actually did, though, was they always gave religious reasons for what they were doing. So he got incredibly disillusioned, because here was the secular people, they were being incredibly selfish, and here were the religious people, and they were being every bit as selfish. The secular people were using rational reasons for why they were being selfish and cruel to the other neighbors. They were just trying to survive. And he says the religious people were using religious reasons. Mm-hmm. So he started being pushed back toward belief in sin. But then there's one guy. Now, the guy in the book, the guy's name is Eric Ridley, but it's actually Eric Liddell. That you might know was in Chariots of Fire. He was a Presbyterian Scottish guy who wouldn't run on Sunday, but then did win the 400-meter gold medal in the 1921 Olympics. He went to he went to China as a missionary, and he was put in the camp. And he died of a brain tumor in there at the age of 43. But he had an amazing impact, and this is actually, believe it or not, is answering your question. He had an amazing impact on Gilkey. Gilkey said, it's rare indeed when a person has the good fortune to meet a saint, but he came as close as anyone I ever had known. Eric Liddell was concerned to minister to the teenagers of the camp. He cooked for them. He supervised recreation for them. He poured himself out for them. He was about the only person that Gilkey saw in the whole camp who was always overflowing with humor, love of life, sacrificial kindness for others, and inward peace. And when he died of a brain tumor, suddenly the entire camp was stunned. So he's trying to say, what made this guy different? I mean, there were a lot of missionaries. There were a lot of religions. What made him different? And this is what he said. He said, Liddell, this is what Gilkey says, was a committed Presbyterian missionary who believed in Christ, but that his salvation was accomplished by God's sheer and free grace. He did not believe, and this is the Christian teaching, you do not believe that God loves you because you're living a good life, because you are surrendering your will, because you're charitable to people. Believes it's totally sheer grace because of what Jesus did. And Gilkey then points out that religion all by itself does not necessarily produce the changed heart capable of moral selflessness. Often, religion can just make our self-centeredness worse, especially if it leads us to pride in our moral accomplishments. So he came to see religious people were kind of self-centered in their religiosity because they thought, my religiosity makes me a good person, that's why God loves me. And he says it actually didn't make them less selfish. It made them part of the problem. People just scrambling and trying and trampling other people so they can survive. It says, and so Gilkey says, in Liddell we have a picture of what a human being could be if he was both humbled and yet profoundly affirmed and filled with the knowledge of God's unconditional love through undeserved grace. And this is the last thing Gilkey said. He's quoting Reinhold Niebuhr here. He says, religion is not the place where the problem of man's egotism is automatically solved. Rather, it is there that the ultimate battle between human pride and God's grace takes place. If human pride wins the battle, that is to say, if you adopt a religion that makes you more proud of your goodness, it says, if human pride wins the battle, religion can and does become one of the instruments of human sin, and this is what you're talking about. But if there is a self that does meet God and surrenders to something beyond its own self-interest, the grace of God, religion may provide the one possibility for a much-needed and very rare release from our common self-concern. So I would say, check out all the different religions, but the genius of Christianity, even though many people who are professing Christians don't see it, is that religion by itself actually makes you as bad as everybody else. In fact, it can make you worse because it makes you a Pharisee. But the doctrine of the grace of God, that you're saved by sheer grace, humbles you and yet affirms you at the same time. You're so bad, Jesus had to die for you. But you're so loved that Jesus was willing to die for you. And so Gilkey saw, here's a guy who actually got it and he was different. So that would be my answer. The reason it was long was because it was a great question, my answer, and also because
So it was a long answer, but he pretty much brought it home. He brought it home by saying that religion is not sustainable. Religion would
works. You can't keep it up. That was me looking at the Ten Commandments and being like, oh my God. I'm in trouble.
So that kind of that definitely got my gears going. It kind of plucked my heartstrings because it was just such a friendly reminder how incredibly loving our Father is, and His grace is sufficient. His mercies renew every day that we wake up, and that's why Christianity, based on the grace of God, separates itself from all other religions. Not to say that we're digging on all other religions, but all other religions don't.
You have to qualify based on works.
Right.
100%.
100%.
That is the difference. And, it's like, this is the only religion where you actually don't have to qualify. So it's universally inclusive and also exclusive.
Right.
Exclusive in the sense that this is the one way. But inclusive in that all can believe that this is the one way. And once you do, and you realize that He is who He says He is. Right. There's too much evidence. It's so crazy, but He gives us the eyes to see and the ears to hear. And so I just pray that anyone listening, their hearts are softening. Even if they have, may think, that they know who Jesus is, but never really dove in for themselves. Their idea of who He is based on whatever they learned growing up, their experience. Something that's been really cool too in this journey is the different layers. And 4 years and we're just getting started. But I think right now in the season of my life, I'm really seeing Jesus and His sacrifice in a romantic way.
Yeah.
I think that's just what's needed is, it's like if there's any picture of, okay, who I would want for me, it's someone that would know him, right? Or at least, have that understanding of that love. And so I've been picturing his sacrifices because it's so personal, even though he died for us all.
Right. Because
of his power, his glory, his transcendence, it's also very personal.
Yeah.
And being wow, how romantic. He said, I knew this girl. I know this girl before the foundation of the earth. I know her. I am so excited. I picked this plan for her. Yeah. And I know that I love her so much. I love her so much that if I don't die for her, we can't be together forever. How romantic. The love of my life, died on a cross so we would have a chance to be together forever. Forever, yeah. And for any ladies who are trying to figure out their value and their worth, this is the place to, an identity. This is the place to look. You won't seek that validation from a man that can't give you the time of day or isn't ready or doesn't know what he wants. You have the love of the Almighty, the one and only, and he gave his life, literally for you to have a chance. And the doctrine behind the gospel and needing to him to be that perfect sacrifice, all that comes with time, but just coming to wanting to find out what this love is really like, who he is, and then understanding the doctrine came afterwards. It's I gotta, some people make, some overthinkers are I gotta read it and and then if I read enough, then I'll come to the knowledge, versus being no, God, I want to understand. I want to know who you are. I want to know you deeper. And it's 4 years, and I know the gospel that he died on the cross for my sins, and that I am free, and I don't have to I don't have to be condemned anymore. Yeah. And that's not an excuse to continue to live how I was. It's more so to transform and allow him to transform because of that love. Yeah. But more so just understanding that anybody can have that, and it's so much greater than anything else. Any validation anywhere else, and diving in on who he is, and what he did for us, that is what started to transform, and it's now I'm seeing him, and it's so crazy because it's I already have that knowledge that he died on the cross, whatever. But now it's I've never seen it it's I'm seeing it in a whole new way, right? He takes us deeper. He's absolutely creating a clean heart. He's renewing and changing my desires. Yes. Lord, give me the desires of my heart. But then at the same time, he will, as long as you had said this in the clip, as long as your desires align with his, and you want that. So getting to know his love means you start to trust him. So when he takes away, when things don't go the way that they should, you're able to understand, well, I have this love, and he wouldn't take something from me if it wasn't for a greater good. Mm-hmm. And that's been a battle for me over the last couple of months, is understanding no matter how good something was and how beautiful it was, if he's saying no, trusting that. Right. And the only way to really trust that, instead of throw a tantrum, because I wasn't oh yeah, you took it away. You're blessed. So awesome. I knew you had my best interest at heart. I was why? Yeah. Are you kidding me? Yeah. What? But then coming to and being you know what, I want what you want. Yeah. I'm trying to force it. I'm trying to make it happen on my terms. And it just keeps getting worse. I had you love me, and praying in this season of my life, if anyone's in that season of show me your love, give me a deeper understanding of that love, because if I have that understanding, then I will trust. Yeah, absolutely. And there's a verse in the psalm, I think it's I forget which one, but it says, let me hear of your steadfast love in the morning, for in you I trust. Let me know the way, or let me hear of your steadfast love in the morning. It says, it's either for in you and make me know the way I should go, for in you I trust. Because of that love, right? I want to know where you want me to go, because I trust. Right. It's so good. It's so good. Kind of and I think also with the level of intimacy that is increased between you and the Father, you start understanding more of what love really is. Because I think when it comes to secular
culture, secularism would definitely flip love into a way of like, just follow your heart, do whatever, just do what you want, do whatever makes you happy. So if you want to be a man and you're a woman, go ahead and be a man.
Whatever you feel
and stuff like that.
But feelings are so deceitful, because the heart's deceitful. And like that's one thing like that we can all agree on is like we cannot teach moralism because we cannot achieve it.
Yeah.
That's why people fall away from the faith, because they're like, I will never qualify. And it's like we can't. And that's also the most amazing thing, because messages that just preach be good are actually damning to the human soul, because we're either damned to our despair, like, oh, I'm never going to make it, or we're damned to our pride. Like, oh, I'm good. Like, I'm good.
I'm good. I don't need anything.
Look at this list of good things that I do.
And you start naming the accolades and stuff.
Yeah, and when we understand who God is, how holy He is, right? How just completely separate from us, like how far the gap is. Yeah. I remember watching this documentary called American Gospel, and I think there's two different ones, but it was the second one. And a gentleman was giving the example of just understanding like why can't, number one, God just sweep sin under the rug? Yeah. But then also understanding like God's holiness and why like it is like why we have to understand the depravity and like the depth of our sin, not to like feel bad about ourselves all the time, because I think that's another thing that drives people away. Yeah. But more so to understand like we do need something greater to humble us and to guide us, because we can't do it on our own. No. And what it said was, he goes, picture you go into a junkyard lot with a bunch of cars and you key some cars. Like no one's gonna say anything. You're in a junkyard, no one cares. Yeah. Let's say you go to Toyota dealership. Yeah. You go to a brand new 2023 Camry and you key that car. You know, like now you are doing, now the level of what you're doing, like the consequence is much higher. Right. Because now go into a Lambo parking lot and go and do that. Right. He's like, that is like, the equivalent, like now the punishment is that severe because the value of what you are hurting or damaging or going against is much higher, much more value. Yeah. And he gave that example of us and us with God, like he's that much separate, like more holy. Right. And so anyways, kind of that just I digress. My point is like it's a freeing feeling to know that I am a wretch, like they say Amazing Grace, that I do need help, that I can't do it on my own. But at the same time, even though that was the case, he still saw me as valuable. Yeah. I'm more precious than rubies, like we're so busy chasing. I saw like something that said, it must break God's heart to see us so, chase after a love that he so desperately wants to give us every day. Right. And it's like, we're so busy trying to chase everything but him, even as believers. And it's like, I know like when my life starts to, something I'm learning in this season too, is like to truly be dependent. And to do the work in me to where when things get good, I'm not like, oh, check, I did my devotional, we're good to go. Right. Because he starts to be that thing on the back burner. And then pain comes, stuff comes crumbling down. But it creates such an intimacy with God. Right? Absolutely. But then it's like, he's like, I want you to still want me even in the good times. Yes. And how do we do that? By, again, understanding and getting a deeper revelation of his love. Absolutely. And getting deeper revelation of his love is actually reading Bible. And I encourage people, because we're the most, even Pastor Sean would say it too, that we're the most illiterate generation when it comes to Bible literacy. Yeah, the word 100%. Yeah, so not good. It is not good. We need to be better. Prophets to sway us if we don't know what the Word of God actually says, or my interpretation on this verse, or what does the text actually say? Right. What was the context that it was written in at the time, and how does it apply to us now? And really going in on that, and then reading it for ourselves versus getting our opinions from a pulpit. Right. Especially on the topic of love, like because people say, "Oh, well, love is love." Well, love is really not love, because God is love. Yeah. And just like literally, the Gospel of John in chapter 3. Yeah. John chapter 3 literally embodies what a selfless, sacrificial love really looks like, is when Jesus, out of obedience and out of
the love that he had for the world,
for us,
that
we didn't stand a chance.
We didn't have stand a chance, and he hung on the cross,
and he didn't have to.
And he even in prayer, he looked at God and said, "Is there another way? Do I have to hang on this cross? Like, there has to be another way."
And that's so good, because then when we're struggling and we feel like no one can relate, we truly can believe he can relate, because he went through everything, every emotion, and still didn't break, so we can like attach ourselves to him as that substitute, right? That atonement. Oh my gosh, I was gonna say something else and I forgot. Whatever. But yeah, love. Oh, the love is love movement. Yeah. So it's crazy. Like, so we believe in this truth, right? Right. This one truth, and it's like the gospel is about self-denial, right? And Pride Month, and like it's about self-expression, and like, like do what you feel versus be obedient, die to self, right? So literal pride is like, and then humility, right? And then whoever wants to be first must be last. So it's just interesting the just stark contrast in those movements. And again, it's like we live in a society, and obviously because of the times we're in, that they're trying to blur all the absolutes. Like, what is a man? What is a woman? Yeah. What is good? What is evil? Yeah. And if we can blur absolutes, we can make the truth subjective. Yeah. Versus anchoring it objective, then everyone's operating off their own truth. Like Hitler thought he was being moral according to his moral standards. Correct. So yeah, and it just becomes so like everybody has their own interpretation of love, right? Yes. And then when people hear, well, what is these people saying about God is love and love is God? Like, what does that really mean? Yeah. Well, it's just a lack of, number one, the encounter with God, right? Yeah. Because if it has to start first with an encounter. You were radically encountered by the Holy Spirit, like, by the Lord. Yeah, if me met me 5 years ago, like if 5 years ago me met me now, she'd be like, let's say if someone asked you 5 years ago, what love stood for you, what love stands for you, what is love to you 5 years ago versus the Caitlin that you are today, it would obviously be a radical different. Oh my God. By miles. I wouldn't even fully know. Like, that's another thing about who you get around matters. Like, seeing people know, like this couple, like they're my best friends, with like knowing their values. I was actually journaling about love the other. Yeah, I'm gonna read it too, because this is so funny that we're talking about it. But like, it's just so wild. I would have had a worldly definition of like feelings. Me too. And it's meant to be chemistry. Yeah, and like, compatibility, and it's a decision, right, and it's a feeling. So you have to feel it. That's why you fall in love. That was me like 10 years ago. You know what I mean? But it's so funny because I was, I do try to. I'm not a journaler. I don't really, but I do write down thoughts. So I was writing, and it was just literally on the concept or the topic of love and what love stands for me now with my relationship that I have with the Lord. And I just wrote down, obviously this was inspired by Corinthians, and when it talks about love is patient, love is kind. Yeah. It also protects, it doesn't boast. It's also unbiased, and the express love done on the cross, it was a byproduct of obedience, I wrote down. Because I always look at the cross. Like every time I need the greatest expression of love. Yeah, so every time I need like a ultimate perspective, I always look at the cross and what was done in the cross, right? On the cross. So then I kind of wrote down these thoughts here. I put, love is absolutely a sacrifice, and what Jesus did for us on the cross was out of love and obedience to the Father. God created us in his image, meaning out of love, he chose to create man. I believe that the fact that we are his image bearers, to know love is to know God, but also know ourselves. To confidently look in the mirror and know you're staring at love. So you can confidently look at the mirror, being that we're image bearers, that we were created in his image, that we should confidently look in the mirror and be staring at love. But the world robs us from that, because the world wouldn't tell you that is what true love is. And so I continue to write down my thoughts, and I continue by writing down, to know love is to know that it doesn't come from self-centeredness, but it's selfless. Self-sacrifice, There's no hidden motives or agendas. You simply make a choice and choose to love on your partner
through the ups and downs. The good works that the Lord has done from the Garden of Eden to the cross mirrors what love is and how it was designed for it to be executed and expressed amongst each other, to honor one another, respect one another, all while we glorify the Father. And I think it does fall in line with the commandments that he wants us to uphold. It's like we are to obviously love the Lord, but also love ourselves, love our neighbors more than ourselves. It's a selfless kind of love. It's almost like a sacrificial kind of love. Like when the Bible says that God gave His only begotten, right? So His only. We can even stop there. His only. What's your only? Like we all talk about dating and who we wanna date, right? Are we willing to give our only to that person that we see as a potential mate? You know what I'm saying?
Or even like a big one for me is, are we willing to put that person that we would want to make our only on the altar,
right? And
put God first, right? Before, like, because I just find myself wanting the gift more than the giver of the gift sometimes. And He's like, if I let it be that way, Caitlin, it'll crumble.
Yeah, because you're going to turn your relationship into an idol.
Yes, 100%.
And that's why so many Christians do fail. And we could talk about that a little bit. Like so many Christians do, because I failed plenty of times in the relationship arena, even after I was saved, and I was trying to do the right thing by doing the God honoring thing and courting and going to church together, serving together, and things didn't work out, and then things are said, things weren't said, and there's misinterpretation of people's feelings and so on and so forth, that it just crumbles because you're so infatuated with like, oh well, God finally answered my prayers, and he and
there might have been alignment.
There might have been.
I can say that in my own experience, there was definitely alignment. There was definitely values and alignment, but when you each aren't in a place spiritually to where you've done like the work internally to overcome the things that you might hold on to for validation, like a relationship, like things get good in that relationship, you start putting God on the back burner, and like that could happen, and it's just like that, you can't allow that, and so God's not going to allow something that's going to take you from Him. And if He does, it's like eventually it just comes crumbling anyways.
Down,
and so I find that to be so important is like wanting the giver of the gift more than the gift itself, because we can just then attach ourselves to that idol.
Absolutely. And it's so easy for anything, including a relationship, to become your idol, because you get stuck in the infatuation phase of the relationship, where it feels new, it feels great, you're in the quote-unquote honeymoon phase of the relationship, so everything looks cool, everything looks great, everything sounds great, whatever he says to you sounds awesome, whatever you say to him, it sounds awesome too, everything's so reciprocable, and everything's reciprocated, and obviously in the beginning it looks nice, it feels nice, it's brand new, but then you start doing life long enough with that said person, then you start seeing the humanity in the stuff. You start seeing the ugly. Real. Things do get real, absolutely, and you start seeing some of the ugly sides of that individual, because at the end of the day, we are human beings. We are flawed human beings, and we all come short to the glory of God, and we do have our shortcomings, and
things
we do have our
overcome.
Absolutely, and that's, I believe, where the challenge starts. Like you have to take on that challenge and make a choice. Like you're choosing to love God first, and you're choosing to honor what God gave you by having this person in your life and doing life with. And how are you going to steward that relationship?
And sometimes there's things that He needs us to go through alone in our singleness.
Right.
That way we don't bring singleness problems into our relationships.
Yeah.
And like it's like definitely been reflecting a lot on that these couple of months. It's like, what does God need me to learn through these experiences?
Right.
Like, who do I need to become as a woman? Praying for my own like self as a spouse, like becoming that woman, becoming that person, and
understanding your role in the potential relationship
instead
that
of
God,
like going out and pursuing like you're looking for, like no, like
Do you feel
that
he
who finds a wife finds a good thing? He who finds. Right.
And I have a question for you. So we touched on identity, right? Do you feel that a lot of us, especially in our generation, because the lack of understanding what identity is and where our identity lies, do you think that because the lack of that, or maybe finding identity in the wrong things, will falter and bleed into relationships, and not just romantic relationships, but just relationships in general, like friendships, community?
100%. Like I can share, like, just from personal experience, like experiencing someone who, big people pleasing tendencies, right? So it's like,
I'm trying to get that.
Big people pleasing.
People pleasing.
Yeah, I was like, said it really fast. People pleasing tendencies. People pleasing tendencies.
Yeah.
People
got it.
And it's like, how do I say this? Like almost like the love that, if the person you're with, the love that they're giving is out of a lack, like it's almost like a false humility. Like, like it's like, if I'm a good enough boyfriend, if I love you all the right ways, if I treat you this way, then I have value. Right. And then my value and my validation comes from this. Yeah. So then he'll realize, or she'll realize, that that's a big weight to carry. Yeah. And then the self-condemnation and the lack of self-image, compounds, and the people-pleasing compounds, and someone's loving you because they don't want to lose you, not because they truly love you for who you are in their life. If they really know that, if they're clear on that, and then they like realize, like, oh my gosh, like I'm putting everything on, like I'm gonna fail this girl. I can't lead her. Yeah. Like I'm too passive. I haven't figured these things out. I don't know who I am before as a man. Yeah. Like it's like understanding, like that. Yeah, you wouldn't want that. You no matter how good something might be, you want to know someone who knows their identity. And sometimes, like, we can put our identity in how well we treat our person, but then they become like the source of our validation, like the source of our like identity and where it lies. And I think also that on top of the world not really teaching identity, they tell us to put it in what we do, right? Which takes us back to the first conversation we were having. I'm like, if your identity is what you do, that's like the same way as like, that's why we have a lot of like big churches with lots of energy but no real praise and worship. Yeah. Because their calling isn't the Lord, their calling is the stage. Right. And then we have a bunch of ministries that are empty and not producing fruit because they're waiting to feel good during worship. Like, it's like, where's our heart at with these things? Yeah. Where's our heart at when we want a relationship? Is it because we just want that right now? Like for like to feel good, or to be validated, like even as believers, or because genuinely, like, okay, I'm ready for a spouse, like, God, it's your work. Yeah. And usually when we want to force it is because we don't trust God. Yeah. That's a fact. Like, it's just, and then that navigating that, but when you go back to where your identity really lies, like, that's really the only answer. Right. Like, you can look at a situation or a breakup or a falling out, like 20 different ways within friendships or whatever. But really it comes down to like, all these different ways that you can try to fix it or fix yourself or analyze. And it's like, what I found recently in the last, couple of months is just shifting my focus to the Lord. Absolutely. And I really think of the walk on water miracle in Matthew. Yeah. Because, and I actually went at so I was really having I was really struggling to let go and trust God about a month or so ago. And I was really, being a baby, throwing a tantrum to him one morning in prayer and being like, I just don't understand. It feels like I remember texting my roommate. I was like, it feels like I'm drowning the night before, and I woke up so heavy. And I crack open the Word, and sure enough, like it's the it's that miracle. And I started to read it.
You're talking about when Peter walked on water.
Yes, and he gets out, like, he has the faith, to get out. The only other human being who's ever walked on water in human history. And, he's looking at him, and then he starts to look at everything that's going wrong, and he starts to drown. Yeah. And sure enough, he says, Lord, save me. And then it says in the Bible, it says, immediately Jesus reached down and saved him and said, oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? Yeah. And I wept when I read that, because it's so true. I was so, when I was saying I'm drowning, I was literally looking at, it was like when it rains, it pours type of situation. And it was hitting all at once. And I was like, I'm drowning. And it's like, I'm not looking to the one who can pull me out of that. Yeah. It's not, he's like, just focus. I'm just trying to get you to focus on me, And I read that and I was like, wow, like my answer is the answer to my pain, the deliverance from my pain is to like look to him and keep my eyes on him. And then I forced myself. This is actually right before going into the gym. So funny. I sat in my car and I watched that episode on The Chosen. I skipped to it. And I saw, because I know that they had filmed it. And I was like, I need to put like visuals to what I just read. Even though I've read it before, it's just gonna do something for me. And the whole scene had me weeping. Watch The Chosen if you haven't.
It's such a great show.
If you're gonna binge anything, binge
The Chosen.
But and I watched it and it was so mind-blowing because in the clip, you know, for like the lines, like Jesus says to Peter, why do you think I allow trials? And Peter's like, I don't know. And he's like, and I'm frustrated, like your own people are having problems. Like he's like, I'm having problems and you're here healing everybody else and you're here feeding the 5,000. Like what about your person? Like what about me? And he's like, why do you think I allow trials? And he's like, I don't know. He's like, so to prove the genuineness of your faith, to strengthen you. You know, you have to keep your eyes on me. And then at one point, he's pulling him back in the boat. He's like, I have many things planned for you, Simon, including hard things. And I was like, you know, but it's such a privilege because I'd rather be, I heard this on Sunday, I'd rather be in the fire with the Lord than comfortable outside of the fire without him.
Absolutely.
And I thought that was so good. And if you're in a tough season, you feel like you're being tried by fire. Fire in the Bible is synonymous with purification and like cleansing, refining. And I'm definitely going through a season of refinement for sure, because I was thinking of the miracle in Daniel where the three guys, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you know, they refuse to bow down to these Babylonian idols, and they get thrown into this fiery furnace, and they say like, you can throw us in there and our God will deliver us. Like that's how much trust they have in God and how much conviction they have. Like we need men like that now. Like, where are they at? And then they're like, but even so, like even if he doesn't deliver us, like we'll be fine. And like they get thrown into that fire and they're unbound. Like God literally burns away the chains, right? Like burns away the ropes and lets them go free. And then like he says like, oh, and then there was a fourth and he looked like the Son of God because Jesus was even there with them in the fire. So like, and like it reminds me of Isaiah 43 when he's like, when you know, even though like you, like there's fire, like you shall not be, when you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned. He's like, oh, he really, you know, uses these things to free us. It's like almost like he's pruned or like burned away all the things that were keeping me from fully being connected to him and following through and being obedient to my purpose. Being like, are you going to lean on me? Are you going to look to the storms? Or are you going to keep your eyes on me?
Absolutely.
You know, and it's like,
and it also increases the level of spiritual maturity that you are going to have, because that will be the byproduct of that.
You want that.
Yeah, because in your immaturity, you would think, oh my gosh, because being in the fire can be misinterpreted in your spiritual immaturity as if you're walking in hell, like it's hell on earth for you. When it's really not hell on earth.
You can have joy.
Yeah, you can have joy, because I think that sometimes us, when we get so into our humanity, into being immature spiritually, like we give way too much credit to the devil. Like the enemy doesn't have like that much power over us. Yes, he's a cunning, sly slickster, and he will set some traps and will be conniving and so on and so forth. But he doesn't have that much power where you're going to be that hell will be present and you'll be walking in hell while you're on earth, because you did this and you did that and you made mistakes, and what you did in the past, it's unforgivable. Like it's not hell on earth for you guys. Like maybe God's allowing things to happen in your life for you to be put in the fire, for you to get, like you said, so articulate, like you articulated, like sometimes he needs to burn off the shackles and the bonds and shackles that you are currently being a slave of.
My pastor says that sometimes that he goes, you know, did you know that the God will give the devil permits to mess with your life because he knows what it's going to produce in you?
Absolutely.
Like anything that he allows, it's because and it's like, it makes you cringe when I mean,
look what he did with Job. Like, he had a conversation with Satan and Satan said, okay, as long as you don't kill him, you can take anything away from him, but you know, as long as you don't kill him. And sure enough,
I know,
you know, Job stood this test of time.
And he gave him back double.
And he gave him that double.
It's a double portion.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. And then what I was thinking about too is like people will be like resistance, like you know, and I'm finding that I downplayed like how much the enemy tries to thwart me in my life. And like I was hanging with my friend Keisha for 4th of July, and she was like, in this season of your life, Kate, she's like, I want you to really pray to God to reveal to you how deep and real the spiritual warfare actually is. Like in every moment. Like, like the devil hates you. Right. You know what I mean? And it's not to use an excuse when things go bad, like say it. Yeah. It's more so like to be aware, to not fall asleep, to not get lackadaisical or like or compromising in like my values in certain areas. Be like, no, like you have to understand like when you're involved with somebody too, right? Like you're taking on their demons, right? So talking about stuff like that, like realizing who, and then she's like, and then it'll give you more compassion over people because when people come at you a certain way and you're seeing their in the spirit, like they'll be like, oh, that's not you. That's the, like, you know, the darkness, like that's being used against me, like through you. Right. I'm gonna pray for this person versus like taking it personal when someone's condemning you or rebuking you or whatever. If you have some sort of like even if they're a non-believer, like you're having issues at work or something, understanding like this person and like from the mental health space is really battling something, like you know, say what it is, it's bad, whatever, battling their demons, they got their stuff, like we can see them from a different lens and be more compassionate and then carry ourselves as true believers and like, you know, turn the other cheek, like actually do that because we have the love of God. That's so good. And then I was listening to a speaker this weekend at a conference I was at that was talking about like how do we remove the burden of serving, of like doing, of like the burden of something. And it's what Jesus says about when someone asks you to go 1 mile, carry it 2. The only way that a burden is removed is by being willing to do more than what is required. It's called the 2nd mile principle. Right. To go the 2nd mile. It's like to remove that burden, like of, you know, whatever it is to do it like with enjoyment, right? You know, like
you got to find joy in everything that you do.
But usually it's done by doing the hard things. Like we live in a world that's very lazy and do what you feel, whatever.
And everything's so instant. You want everything instantaneously.
And from like a fitness perspective, it's like you want the result. Do
the microwave generation?
Do double of what's required. You know, like so. I don't know why that thought popped in my head because it wasn't necessarily on topic, but it's really cool being on here.
It has been.
Yeah.
Last question for you before we wrap up.
Okay.
It's just a fun little question because I like to end in a fun way.
Yes.
Okay. If you had to choose between loyalty and respect, which one would you choose? Loyalty or respect, and why?
Oh my gosh, that's actually really hard.
There's no wrong or right answer. It's just what you would think is the right answer for you, and how is it applicable in your life?
Because someone can be loyal to a fault, and that's dangerous.
Right.
I would want respect because out of respect would come loyalty, in my opinion. Like, if you respect me, you'll be loyal to what's best for me. Even if what's best for me might be you not being around anymore. Right. Or you not being in my life in a season that you might need to, you know, God might ask you to leave. Yeah. And, you know, you respect me enough to do the hard thing and walk away. You know, you respect me enough to be loyal to what's going to be best, you know? Yeah. And that respect, I think, continues to breed loyalty, like even in other circumstances. Like you respect me enough to make the right decision, you know, to not make that bad business decision that would put me in a bad mind or whatever. So I guess that's my answer. Yeah. That's what about you?
I go respect as well. Yeah. And I think men, because I saw this poll, and that's why I wanted to kind of play with it. Like 90% of men
want respect.
Chose respect, and it's funny because I think. When it comes to we talked about love a lot in this episode, which is great. I think that how you love a man is not necessarily affection physically or even by service.
Showing respect.
I think it is by effectively loving a man. Cheat code for you girls out there that are looking and still in the dating scene. you have to respect your man. And if you show respect in a
He'll
way,
slay dragons for you. You respect him. You know?
So I think with me, like my love language is words of affirmation.
Me too.
I love to be affirmed. I love words.
Tell me I'm pretty.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be about like the outward stuff.
I know.
But it definitely, things that I hear. Adelise, for example, she struggles with words, but she's learning that, hey, I can definitely tap into the way that I speak, because she is a great writer. Yeah. But she's not a great communicator. Yeah. But she's like, there's a reason why God put you in my life now, because now I could translate my writing capabilities into speaking and affirming you, and I want to love you by affirming you. So I'm trying my efforts and putting my efforts in affirming you, because she knows the love language. That's another cheat code. Knowing each other's love language, it's so good because it's so refreshing. Yeah. It puts you in a space where you guys can know how you move emotionally and things of that nature. So if you know that acts of service, for example, is a love language that your mate has, then serve them in any way, shape, or form, in any type of capacity. If they like gifts, give them a small little gift just because it's a Tuesday. Mm-hmm. Don't wait for a birthday or an anniversary. You know what I mean? So I think it's important to know people's love languages. Yeah. I think it's important to know how to love. And, loving a man definitely comes with giving them respect. Yeah, because once a man feels disrespected, it's hard to come back from that, Yeah,
it's wounding that masculine soul for sure, because that's what they long for. Women want to feel like, am I worth fighting for? Will you fight for me? Will you protect me? Will you pursue me? And do you desire me? That is woven into our soul. So I've been reading a lot about that in the Wild at Heart book. Yeah, recommend
that.
But okay.
Yeah, sweet. That's my answer. Well, so we both chose respect. Yeah. But thank you again for coming through. And as I told you off camera, you are like a Kingdom Talk pledged member. You can come back anytime you want, when the time allows it. I am having panels, so if you want to be part of a panel, that'd be dope to have a panel. Speaking of panels, I will be having a panel a week from today. I'll be having a 3-person panel, and we're going to be talking about some stuff. So I'm pretty excited about that. I'm going to leave all her information on the description below so you can follow her. She does fitness. Unfortunately, we didn't really talk about your fitness stuff. Oh we had so much to talk about.
That's another one to come back to.
Yeah, we could come back for that.
Being a believer in a really lusty image. I'm literally in the lion's den, you guys.
Yeah, so pray for her.
Literally.
The fitness world is very lusty world.
Surrounded by all these baseball players that are
like,
oh my God.
Yeah. Anyways. So if you want to come back and we could talk about that.
Yeah, that's a whole, we'll make that a thing.
Yeah, for sure. But descriptions on the links on the description, I should say. And if you're new to the show, I am a weekly show every Wednesday. You can check me on TikTok, all the social media platforms for the clips. Spotify as well. So if you are on Spotify and you're listening to our beautiful angelic voices, go ahead and share that link on Spotify and share it with a friend, a neighbor, a coworker. It really does help on that side of the algorithm. Thank you again, girl.
It was awesome.
It was awesome.
I was so grateful to be here.
And thank you. We love you, and we'll see you next time.
Yes.
Bye.